And welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. Our topic, Trump empowered Fauci and let the states lock us down. Let's get something straight. Anthony Fauci deserves every bit of the blame he's getting. The man just pleaded the Fifth over 100 times. His record is a trail of bad science, shifting stories, and authoritarian advice that helped wreck lives, close schools, and crush businesses. But Fauci did not act alone. He was empowered, elevated, and given the biggest platform of his career by the President of the United States at the time, Donald J. Trump. And Trump didn't just empower Fauci. He stood back while states and cities shut down businesses, closed schools, shuttered churches, and ordered ordinary people to stay in their homes. In my view, those actions violated the Constitution. The president bears responsibility for both, elevating Fauci, empowering him, and allowing the states and cities to lock us all down. Trump elevated Fauci and gave him the stage. Fauci had already been NIAID director for decades. Trump could have sidelined him. Instead, he put Fauci at the center of the White House coronavirus task force and gave him the national microphone. Trump publicly validated Fauci. On March 17, 2020, he called Fauci a major television star for all the right reasons. What that has to do with figuring out the government's response to coronavirus is another matter. Months later, even as tensions grew, Trump was still saying, I have a very good relationship with Dr. Fauci. I've known him I've had for a long time, right from the beginning. I find him to be a very nice person. I get along with him very well. I like him personally. What does any of that matter about the job, the quality of the job that Fauci's doing for the American people? Nothing. When the president repeatedly says those things and keeps a bureaucrat at the podium, the bureaucrat gains enormous power. On March 16, 2020, Trump's White House released the federal guidelines titled 15 Days to Slow the Spread. Those guidelines told Americans to stay home, keep children out of school, avoid gatherings, and limit social contact. That was the federal signal that launched the shutdown culture. 2 weeks later, on March 29, Trump himself announced the extension from the Rose Garden. Trump said, the better you do, the faster this whole nightmare will end. Therefore, we will be extending our guidelines to April 30th to slow the spread. The better you do, meaning the better you do on the shutdown, the faster this whole nightmare will end. Well, all of that was a total lie. But Trump owned it. He extended it. The national emergency declarations he signed gave governors the cover they needed. The president let the states lock us down, and that was a constitutional failure. This is the deeper problem. Trump made a deliberate choice to leave the lockdown decisions largely to the governors. He said the states would call their own shots. In practice, that meant the federal government stood back while states and cities imposed some of the most sweeping peacetime restrictions on American liberty, protected by the Constitution, in modern history. They shut down businesses, they closed schools, they shuttered churches, they ordered people to stay in their homes under threat of fines and arrests. These were not minor public health measures. In my view, they violated the core of the Constitution, our core constitutional protections of our liberty, of our freedom. The First Amendment protects the freedom of assembly and the free exercise of religion. Closing churches while keeping liquor stores and other preferred businesses open was an assault on religious liberty. Banning gatherings of more than a handful of people was a direct restriction on the right of the people to peaceably assemble. The Constitution does not contain a pandemic exception. The Fifth Amendment and the Due Process Clause say the government cannot deprive people of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Ordering millions of Americans to close their businesses, lose their livelihoods, and remain confined to their homes is a massive deprivation of liberty and property. Due process requires real process, real justification, and real limits to the government's interference. In too many places, there was almost none of that. Just emergency declarations from governors that stretched on for months. A president who takes the Constitution seriously does not simply shrug and say the governors are in charge when churches are closed, schools are shuttered for a year, and free people are told they cannot leave their homes. The president has a duty to defend the Constitution. That includes using the bully pulpit, the Justice Department, and every lawful tool available to challenge government actions that trample core rights. Yes, the Trump Justice Department later intervened in some religious liberty cases. Yes, Trump eventually pushed for reopening and tweeted, "Liberate Michigan," for example. Those things matter, but they came after the damage was already underway. The initial wave of shutdowns happened with the federal government's and President Trump's acquiescence. The bottom line here, Anthony Fauci was never elected. He answered to the president. Trump was the elected leader. Trump chose to keep Fauci, elevate him, praise him, and give him the stage. Trump also chose to let the states and cities impose lockdowns that violated the United States Constitution, that violated our personal rights, our liberties, and our freedoms. The boss is the boss. Trump was the boss. He put Fauci in position to do damage, and he stood back while constitutional rights were restricted across the country. That is the truth. And I'm Mark Scaringi. We defend the Constitution even when it's inconvenient, and we hold our own side accountable when it fails to do the same. Thanks for listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.